It's a thought experiment on paying off debt. It's meant to be a motivating thought experiment. It's a new way to look at paying off your debt and the effect it has on your required finances moving forward. A lot of people, Danny, we were talking about this before we started recording. A lot of people are motivated by the idea of passive income.
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I have talked about this a ton. To our listeners, episode 7 is a good one to check out. What's the deal with passive income? It's a really fun episode. Yeah, the idea that you save up enough money, you get this large enough nest egg that the yield on it alone, the growth on it alone, is enough to cover your living expenses, your debt payments, or at least most of them, right? And that's hugely motivating for a lot of people. It's like, wow, I could get, if I save aggressively enough and I get enough of a nest egg, I could, in theory, get to a point where I could just walk away if I needed to. Like the yield, the growth alone is enough to pay for it.
Yeah, because the promise of passive income, right? The promise of passive income gives you the hope of no longer trading your time for money, right? And so that is why it's so compelling to people when you don't have that desire to trade your time for money, right?
Yeah.
Going back to our interview with Eamon, he mentioned trading your effort for money rather than your time for money. And I think a lot of us would love to transition into having our base needs met and then trading our effort for money rather than selling our time.
100%. That is so well said. I mean, imagine what that would feel like, where you get to a point where now it's up to you to choose if you want to put effort into something, right? And for most people, they save their efforts for the things that really speak to them, that they're interested in, that they really like. It's just being more intentional with how you spend your time. And I love that example. But I tease it with the passive income first, because passive income is, the driver behind that is saving, accumulating capital and wealth, right? But paying off debt is kind of the inverse, right? It's not really going into a bucket per se. You don't see like a dollar amount building up. It does increase your net worth, right? Paying off debt. But there is a way to view this, to flip it on its head and think about the inverse, that is equally just as motivating, and it's very much similar to the idea of passive income, right? And it goes like this.
Okay.
It's like, if I pay off a debt, I no longer have to make that monthly debt payment. But I also know that the income I need to earn moving forward is not dollar for dollar. It's actually larger than that, right? Because let's say I spend $10,000 a year on a debt. Let's say I pay off that debt. So that $10,000 in payments that I normally have to make every year is gone. That doesn't mean that I now need $10,000 less in income. It's actually even more than that, because to get a net $10,000, you also have to take into account taxes you owe, right? Your gross earnings minus taxes gets you your take-home pay. And so it's from that take-home pay that you pull from to pay for your debts. So the idea is like, if I remove this expense, how much less can I afford to earn in order to still meet my needs? And we're going to go through some examples to our listeners. I think it'll make a lot more sense when we actually dive in. Let's give you an example. So the $10,000 in expenses, right? If somebody was in a 30% effect, like a tax rate between federal, state, and FICA taxes,
okay,
if they pay off a debt that they had to pay $10,000 towards every year, that means they can now earn $14,285 less in income, assuming a total tax rate of 30%, right? You'd have to earn $14,285 gross to then net $10,000 in income, assuming a 30% tax rate, all things considered, right? So there's like it's like a bump in the amount of income less that you need to earn in order to meet your expenses. I think this will get clearer.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think this will get clearer if we give a few more examples. So it seems counterintuitive, and it kind of is, but let's think about it. Let's say somebody is earning $70,000 a year, right? Gross income. Single, no kids, no other income sources. It's just a W-2 paycheck. $70K is their salary. Super simple tax situation. They don't have any, child tax credits, nothing. Just simple $70K. In that situation, you're looking at about 7.65% in FICA taxes, right? That's going to be taken out of your paycheck. That goes towards your portion of Social Security, Medicare, things like that. $70,000 income is going to be in the 22% marginal tax rate. So effectively around 10.3% in taxes are coming out. Some at the 10% bracket, some at the 12, some at the 22. And then assuming a 5% state tax rate, you're looking at somewhere around a little over $3,000 in state taxes. So you take out your FICA taxes and your federal taxes and your state taxes, and that $70,000 income take home is now just over $54,000, right? So about $16,000 in taxes were paid.
Okay.
I think most people understand that concept. If I make $70,000, that's not what I'm going to be taking home. That's just my gross salary. My take home pay is going to be less because of things like taxes, right? And in this example, it's about $54,000. In other words, it's 77% of your total income. So you're looking at like a 23%
is what you take home and
home.
then can spend on your living needs and your debts, etc.
Right.
Okay.
So now let's say I have a car payment, right? And let's say this, I looked up, and by the way, Danny, I Googled average car payment in 2024 because
they hurt.
$726 a month, average car payment. I even feel like it's maybe higher than that, just from stories I've heard. I hear a lot of stories now of people having $1,000 car payments, which is wild.
Yep.
But 726 is the number I used. If you multiply 726 by 12, it comes out to $8,712 a year. So going back to that example of income, of that take-home pay, $8,712 would have to go towards this car payment if this person had a $726 car payment a month, right? But the question is, that $8,712 a year, how much money does that person have to make gross salary in order to net enough income take home to pay for that $8,712 a year? Well, in this example I just gave with those tax rates, they would have to earn $11,314 to then pay for taxes to then have enough to afford $8,712 a year. And so, on this example, imagine how motivating it could feel if you said, wow, if I just pay off this car loan, I then have the flexibility to earn $11,314 less in income. My income could drop by that much. And for somebody making $70,000, that's a meaningful drop in income, right? My income could drop by that much, and nothing about my financial situation would change regarding my ability to meet my living expenses, right? Because I've taken care of that debt. It's gone. It's no longer there. And I'm now free of that obligation, which gives me some bandwidth on the downside of my income, if you will, to handle a loss of income or a decrease in income, right? And I don't know.
And this would or could be a way that someone could kind of de-stress their life, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you were working a job where you were working exactly 40 hours and you received 70,000 and you have a good work-life balance, it doesn't make a lot of sense to kind of back off of that unless you are looking into retirement or something like that. But if you are someone who is really grinding, right, and you've got 2 or more jobs and you are really pushing to earn that amount, getting rid of that debt and that extra that you needed to pay to taxes before servicing that debt, that could allow you to back off on some of that effort and focus on, more of your home life, your health, things like that.
100% agree. Now,
okay,
I really do think focusing on the how much less can I afford to earn has a lot of profound implications, right? Because if you think about it, so many people don't like their job. Some hate their job. Some are dissatisfied. Some have other dreams, hopes, or aspirations, right? To start their own business or change careers, right? Whatever it might be. Or maybe they just want to scale back because they just are overworking themselves and they wish they had the ability to just work slightly less, right? Whatever the case may be, people feel these things. And if you use this thought experiment, this exercise, to motivate yourself for paying off a debt, to then tell yourself, wow, this debt's paid off. If I really wanted to, I could afford to earn X amount of dollars less than I currently do, and I would still be okay. I get by okay. To me, that is very motivating for somebody to realize there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way to maybe change your situation. I mean, Danny, how many of us, myself included, right? How many of us just stay at a job for so many years because the idea of losing our income or trying to switch careers or take a risk regarding our career is just so hard. It's not palatable to us, right? Because we're focusing on what would happen if we lost that income.
Absolutely.
This is just a way to.
I did that for a long time.
Me too.
And it cost me a large amount of potential pay.
Me too. I've been there. And I don't know. I think this is just another one of those thought experiments, those exercises, those things you can do to stick in your tool belt to just motivate yourself, right? It gets pretty profound. Now, to any of our listeners, if you are interested in doing this, it does take a little bit of math, right? So I used a calculator on dinkytown.net, which is a very funny name for a website. There are a lot of really good tax calculators on there. The one I used was payroll deductions. So you can put in like your pay and what your state tax rate is, and it'll calculate for you what your paycheck would be. And it tells you like this much would go towards your Social Security and Medicare, the FICA portion, payroll taxes, this much towards federal, this much towards state. It's high level, but it does a good enough job to give you a sense of where.
Because I assume it's not including health insurance deductions, disability deductions, 401k deductions, stuff like that.
I think you can add in some of those deductions on the calculator to account for that if you want. When I did it, I just put in the gross income and I didn't have any withholdings for anything. I just wanted to know the true tax for $70,000 a year. And I was assuming somebody filing single who doesn't have any kids and no other income sources, right? But that just gives you an idea. You can start to get in you can back into the math, right? And the way you do it is like take whatever the take home pay is and divide it into your gross income. That gives you the percentage, right? So in the example I gave is just over 54,000. So you divide that into 70,000 and it equals about 77%, right? And so you can then use that number to kind of math your way into the numbers I was giving you just a few minutes ago about how much less income you can earn, right? So on the example I gave, $8,712 a year in car payments means you could earn, if you pay that off, you can earn $11,314 less in income. The way you would get that number is you take the 8,712, divide it by 0.77, which was 77% of the gross pay. That was the take-home pay, and that gave you the larger number to kind of effectively tell you what your gross income was that you could reduce by given your tax rate. Hopefully that's not confusing to most people, but it is a good math exercise that I think can be very motivating for a lot of people. And I mean, Danny, I was even thinking about, let's take it to another example, right? Maybe in the spirit of our interview recently with Anson on house hacking, right? Maybe you are renting a place for, I don't know, $2,100 a month, right? And maybe it's a 2-bedroom. And what if you just brought a friend in and house hacked and split the rental between 2 people, and now you're only paying $1,050 a month? Well, you're now saving half of that $2,100, $1,050 a month, which is $12,600 a year, which means in this hypothetical person's example, they could earn $16,300 less in income if they need to, given that they're now splitting an apartment with somebody. Just a simple house hack, right?
Yeah, that's a huge drop
in
required income.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I think there's merit to this thought experiment, this exercise, as a way to motivate somebody, right? And I encourage our listeners, give it a shot. Think about your federal tax rate, your state tax rate, and then also include 7.65%, which is your portion, assuming you're a W-2 employee. That's what you pay towards your Social Security and Medicare tax, and subtract those from 100, and that gives you an idea of what your total tax rate is. You can use a calculator online and just go through this exercise. And I don't know. I think it's a neat way to help people throw another tool in their tool belt towards that path to financial freedom and independence. So, yeah. Speaking of financial freedom, another call out, episode 15, 5 Paths to Financial Freedom. It's a good one to check out in the spirit of this episode today. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Danny, have you ever done this exercise before?
Not in kind of a codified way like you've laid out here.
Yeah.
I generally, the way that I view a lot of things, I know what I'm going to pay in taxes, at least, previously at my job. And I knew what my net would be from that. And then what I essentially calculated was, if I want this item, right, or this trip or this event, whatever it is, I always kind of switched into how many hours do I need to work in order to earn that, and is that thing worth the amount of time spent?
Yeah.
And that was done using kind of like the net of what I would take home.
I love that
I've
example too.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. Like, how many hours do I have to work to make what I just spent money on? It's like, was it really worth dipping into my future work hours to pay for it right now?
Definitely better to think about it before you make the purchase,
Right.
and like, is it worth this amount of my time that I'm going to have to give up?
Yeah.
Or should I look towards something else and move in a different direction? But I think that this is a great complementary episode to, like you said, path to financial freedom and passive income, because you combine the paying off of debt and that enormous reduction in total income needed to be earned with the income coming in from passive sources, and you can kind of take those and meet in the middle to figure out what your actual subsistence and kind of financial freedom numbers are.
Yeah, I mean, somebody might look at this in one of two ways, right? They might look at it in the way we proposed in today's thought experiment, which is, if I pay off this debt, I now have the flexibility, the bandwidth to shift careers, to scale back on my hours, to become more independent with my time, whatever it might be, because I now only have to earn this much money per year. The amount I have to earn is this much less. But another person could come in and go, hey, I'm just going to keep earning what I'm earning, but now I'm going to be using that freed up cash flow that I was originally using to service debts, and just use that to supercharge my accumulation of my savings to then benefit my passive income goals, right? They really both complement one another, much like increasing your income through raises or career growth and cutting back expenses. Those two things are the two factors you need to consider when you're trying to increase positive cash flow. Well, these two things, the passive income and the decreased need for income inverse, are also two things to think about on the puzzle of how do I make my finances work for me and free up my time to the point where I can step away. I think they all just intersect with one another in pretty meaningful ways. So I don't know. I like talking about these things. I find them, you and I nerd out a lot on some technical things sometimes, but
yeah,
I even when I was thinking about this, like, I just had a sense of appreciation. I was like, wow, sometimes some very simple concepts, when you really think about them and embrace them, they can be very motivating. For what it's worth, to our listeners, I hope you got something out of this. And as always, thanks for tuning in to our episodes. We'll see you next week.